Not trading Rasmus Andersson before the start of this season is a ginormous mistake that the Flames will hopefully avoid.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto of the Win Column and Offside News. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we are going to be talking about the risks and liability of bringing Rasmus Andersson into camp and starting the season with the Flames rather than trading him, because all I see are big red flags and warning signs, sirens saying, don't do this. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcast, as well as YouTube. We are here for you throughout the off season, and we will be back to daily shows in a short period of time. My goodness. Let's start with the obvious. The distractions, okay? I do not care what anyone in that room says about we don't hear the noise, we tune out the noise, it's not a distraction, we're very focused. That's not true. You can say it all you want, but you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thankfully, it's just Rasmus Andersson and not 6 other players along with him. I think back to how things were prior to the Zadorov and Lindholm trade, and just how it was just like walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. And you can only do that for so long. And Rasmus Andersson seems like a very nice person. I'm sure he seems like a great dad, great husband, great guy in the community. And he's a good hockey player. But we know that he will say whatever he wants. And he will not. I mean, he'll tone it down. But, I think back to the exit interviews from this season, and like he pretty much washed his hands of this season and of any sign of him returning as a Flame. And I think he was loose. And I don't know if any of you have ever been at a job where like you're just checked out. I'm not saying that he's checked out from like being a Flame. It could have just been the end of the season, playing with a broken leg. He's probably done, ready to get back to Sweden. I get it. That's how I get around 4:00 every day at work. I'm done. But it was very obvious that he was over this season. And when there's this anticipatory, trade happening of one of the best, if not the best, right-handed defenseman available, it's impossible to avoid. And whether it's out of town media asking about it, or if it's him going onto Twitter and liking hate tweets about himself, it's there. It is all there. And the Flames don't have an easy start to this season. And just like last season, I think that the Flames started last season 5-0-0. Okay. And I feel like that was a huge determining factor in how this season played out. Obviously, there was a lot of hockey left after that. But you have the confidence, like you're building off that confidence that you have. Okay, great. Won at home and on the road, had that huge, ginormous comeback to kick off the season against Vancouver. Had a great game against Philadelphia. And then you go up to Edmonton the next night, and it's an unbelievable game. Like, there were good things to build off of. And that is a possibility of something that happens here. But to start the season, they start the season off on a back-to-back on the road. And then they come home. So they start the season in Edmonton and then go to Vancouver. And their Saturday matinee home opener at 2 p.m. against the St. Louis Blues. And then thank God they have 2 days off before Vegas comes to town. And then they're on the road to Utah right after that. They have 2 days off. And then they play Vegas again. And then we're into the third week of the season here. And you go back home to play Winnipeg. And really, Winnipeg and Montreal. Like, all of those teams, I mean, granted, the Canucks are a hot mess. But, like, all of those teams have done something this offseason to improve one way or another. It doesn't matter if they're, needle-moving moves or not, but they've done a culmination of things to better their team. The Flames have been waiting all summer to trade Rasmus Andersson, and it hasn't happened. So if you go out there and start the season, if you leave the month of October 500, I think that's because you have Winnipeg and then the Canadiens, and then you go to Winnipeg. The Rangers come to town, then you're off to Toronto and the Senators. Like, all of these teams were essentially playoff teams or fringe playoff teams. Well, okay, not the Canucks and Rangers. But, all of these teams are better teams. And I'm not convinced that these first sets of games will be the true determining factor of how the season goes, but I think it is a huge, it'll play a huge part. The same way, like I mentioned before, that they were able to build the confidence off of that 5-0 start last season. And I think if it gets off to a bad start, the locker room and the vibes are going to start stinking real bad. Similar to how they did before, Zadorov, Hanifin, Tanev, Lindholm were all traded. And I think we see that, or we could see that with Andersson as well. I mean, everyone knows what's going to happen. So it is literally a matter of just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you are walking on eggshells. But coming up next, we're going to talk about taking valuable time away from the Flames' top prospect, Zayne Parekh, if the Flames don't figure out a way to trade Rasmus Andersson. Ever wish managing money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. I knew that there were areas where I could cut back on spending. And I think, being a little bit in denial didn't help. But seeing my spending habits laid out in front of me really forced me to cut back on the coffee runs, ordering takeout at work, or just, a little retail therapy because I'm bored. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at JessBelmosto. I don't know how many more times myself and other Flames fans can say this, but we need to see Zayne Parekh in the NHL consistently next season. I think it is a huge disservice to send him back to the OHL. He has nothing left to prove there. He was breaking records left and right this past season, putting him in the likes of Bobby Orr, for God's sake. Like, to be an offensive defenseman is the way that he has been in the OHL is impressive. Now, he has, but it's like when you're cooking things, right? You preheat the oven. Well, now he's ready to go in the oven and rise to be an NHL star. Like, you have to let him leave the nest and figure out how to make those wings work. He's going to fall flat on his face, very likely. It's human nature. But I think it would be a huge disservice for the Flames to not have him up with the NHL club and playing consistently. He is a right-handed defenseman. Do you know what position Rasmus Andersson plays? Oh, you're so right if you guessed right-handed defenseman. I don't think that this Flames team is going to be better than what they were last season. So, let the rookie, the promising rookie, your top prospect looking to make the jump to the NHL, let him adjust. The only way he is going to be an NHL player is if you let him play in the NHL. And I don't think that the Flames would necessarily keep him buried in the AHL or OHL and then AHL when he's eligible to play there next season. But that is valuable time wasted if he does not play in the NHL. And yes, of course, you can make substitutions now and have him play, but you know that he's not a third pairing defenseman. And we know it's pretty good. So sure, maybe you let him get his toes wet a little bit on the third pairing rather. Once Rasmus Andersson's traded, he has to move up. Like that is the only logical next step. I personally thought that Rasmus Andersson would have been traded by now. I thought it was going to be after Ekblad signed his extension, we would have seen things happen. Things supposedly have happened with the Kings, but Andersson said no. And I just really don't want to waste valuable time on a prospect's window because a 29-year-old defenseman is at the helm of where he's going to get traded to, and essentially giving you another Noah Hanifin situation where he has his 5 options and then he narrows it down to 1. We know that Vegas has been the only team that he's reportedly been interested in. There's people who have disputed that, but we still haven't seen any movement. The Flames have to do something. Craig Conroy has to do something to not only make sure like he gets a good return, blah, 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 But to make sure that Zayne Parekh is being set up for success, there are a lot of different things that Conroy has to juggle every day. And I give him a lot of credit. I give any general manager a lot of credit. Well, I shouldn't say any general manager, but you have to realize like what your priorities are, because if one of your top priorities is long-term success, you should be looking at getting Zayne Parekh into the lineup as soon as possible, consistently. He scored in his season opener last year, or in his NHL debut last year. He's on pace for 82 goals this year. But no, in all seriousness, why would you limit? Like, this kid has so much potential and could easily be of great benefit to your team. And keeping him out of the lineup does everyone a disservice. And I don't think it's fair to him. And I get it. Like, there's a seniority thing where obviously Andersson is, 29 years old and is kind of running his, or calling his shots rather. But he's not here. He's done his time in Calgary. He's looking for a way out. Let's focus on who's here and who wants to be here, because that's what matters. They've made that abundantly clear. And it is not worth jeopardizing your young talent because you want to appease Andersson. And coming up next, we are going to be talking about something that is very obvious in terms of, the biggest risk of all, which is, of course, injuries. But just constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for that other shoe to drop, and also being concerned about every single shift Rasmus Andersson takes. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames and making the show part of your day. If you have a few moments, I would greatly appreciate it if you ran over to iTunes, or the podcast app, actually, and left a nice little 5-star rating and a little review. It goes a long way. And if you send me a screenshot of you doing that, I will be very appreciative and think of something. But I know that they're like, you can try to see the positive in this. And I get that. Pumping up his value, bouncing back from his very tough season last year. It's a contract year, so he's going to want to play with all he's got. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. That's the concern. When you are playing on the edge like that, guess what? You're more likely to get injured. And do you know what we want to avoid as a team that's trying to trade him? Yes, you're right. We want to avoid injuries. He played the last 12 games of the season with a broken fibula. He was horrendous. Like, there is no other way to put it. He was the first one off the ice for warm-ups. Just about every one of those games. The last 3 games at the Saddle Dome that I went to, same situation. He was never at morning skate. So it was obvious that something was going on. Playing through injuries is something athletes do. And you are never going to convince me that, I mean, obviously, depending on the severity of the break. whatever. I don't know. Your bone's broken. You probably shouldn't be walking on it without a cast. Even if it's just an air cast, let alone skating 20 minutes a night. You will never convince me that that is the smart decision in life. I understand it's the hockey decision, but at some point, all of that is going to catch up to you. So, I hope those 12 games were worth it. You didn't even make the playoffs. More of a problem than you were of help, to be entirely honest. And I feel like I'm going to jinx this by saying this. But looking back at his injury history, you are lucky at what you don't see. You know, since I've covered the team, I've only recalled one real stint of him missing time, and that was in February of 2023 after he was hit by a car in the crosswalk on an electric scooter. So yeah, it's a non-hockey related injury, but like, he's still missed a lot of time, and he has not been the same player since that. You can drastically see a difference, and I will die on that hill. I don't care. He said himself that he should have not come back. He should have been out the rest of the season. And to be quite frank, I don't understand why he didn't. They were not making the playoffs that year. He was so severely hurt and that he admitted, yeah, I shouldn't have come back. Okay. That's all you need to know right there. And then back in 2021, he missed time due to COVID. But all it takes is 1 second. That's literally all it takes. I think back to, obviously, this accident with the scooter. A split second. And it potentially changed the trajectory of his entire hockey career. And you hope you don't have to have, something like a hip resurfacing surgery like that, where they literally grind your hip and like shave and literally resurface it because of the damage that, number one, was caused in the accident or the injury, and then by playing on it afterwards. Like, you don't want that. When I think back to players who have never bounced back after an injury, my mind immediately goes to Andrew Mangiapane. After he had that most recent shoulder surgery and going into his last season with the Flames, like, he just never bounced back from it. I think of players. This is like an AHL player, truly, like not even I guess a French player, French NHLer. Anders Bjork, several shoulder injuries. I think of, those are just the two that come to mind. But there are players who have their entire careers derailed. Think back to Sean Monahan before he was traded to Montreal. I thought it was done. I thought he was cooked because of how severe and repetitive his injuries were, and just the fact that he did not rest enough to fully heal. And the medical staff just let him walk around and play. Well, he can't even walk to breakfast without dragging his leg. The only time that I've dragged my leg when I've walked is when my foot's asleep. Okay? And that's really uncomfortable. But all it takes is one shift. We saw Connor Zary get hurt not once, but twice. So you're telling me you're going to wait from September when camp starts to potentially January, February, and deadlines in March? You're going to let all that time pass and risk a potential season-ending injury or an injury that is significant enough to deter teams from trading for him? You're willing to risk losing him for nothing. And I think that is the most nonsensical, blasphemous idea and route to take. I'm not a general manager. I just enjoy looking at the big picture and breaking things down into digestible pieces. Because you look at this and it's like, yeah, okay, like just wait till the trade deadline. That's fine. Yes, but let's dig a little deeper because there's a lot more that goes into that. And thank you all for tuning into the risks of Rasmus Andersson on today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget to leave a nice little review and comments. I would greatly appreciate it. And you can check us out tomorrow. Hopefully we have a Connor Zary extension. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about the negatives and the risks of not having him signed before camp. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you later.